All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Dweebs Live. I'm your host, Ishvari Maranway. As you know, millions of people are unemployed, struggling, or just need advice right now. It was a really tough year, and we're right at the beginning of hopefully a much better one. Dweebs Global empowers people by providing them with free one-on-one mentorship through a simple contact page. Our career mentors range from senior cybersecurity experts to best-selling authors, and they work alongside our trained and vetted mental health mentors. We also offer free top-notch seminars like this one and extensive career resources. No matter who you are, we are here to help. So if you need someone to talk to, a free resume edit, or anything else, please just go to www.dweebs, that's dweebsglobal.org/contact. So today, Dweebs Global is proud to host our first speaker of 2021, Rami Ismail. It's an incredible honor to have him here. Rami Ismail is a Dutch video game developer and spokesperson in the video game industry on diversity and inclusivity towards developers from developing countries, which is such an incredible and important thing to talk about and to be involved in at this time. He co-founded the studio Glambeer, where he has worked on games like Ridiculous Fishing, Luftrausers, and Nuclear Throne. He's also the person behind is2020over.com, the most asked question of 2020, and we can finally say, yes, it is over. Go check out that website. It's just a wonderful, succinct, depressing list of things that happened in 2020. So he's here today to talk about how to make this year one that matters, a plea to make sincere work. And I want to end with a shout out. Definitely go and follow him on Twitter at @THA_Rami. He has amazing commentary and witty takes about the world. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rami. Thank you so much. A true honor to have you here today.
An absolute pleasure to be here today. Hi, this is also my first talk for the year, so this is very exciting. I'm glad to be here. So my name is Rami Ismail. I made a few slides to introduce who I am, but I just got introduced really well, so I guess we're good on that. I'm a video game developer. I'm Dutch Egyptian based in the Netherlands, and I've been making games for as long as I can remember. As a game developer, I've been a professional in the games industry for about 10 years, and I have worked on award-winning games, including iOS Game of the Year of 2013, Ridiculous Fishing, and I've released games on most major gaming platforms, including PC, PlayStation, iOS, Android, and Nintendo Switch. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about game development and creativity in this new and connected world. We are in a very strange place where the world is available to you through the internet, and that has its advantages, it has its disadvantages. The advantages obviously being that you can participate in most things you want. The disadvantage is that you're competing with literally everybody on the planet. So with that as a start, I want to make a few arguments for trying to do what is genuine and sincere to you instead of trying to do what everybody else is doing or what you feel an industry is doing. Because it turns out that in most cases, if you're seeing an opening, other people have seen it too. And if you're seeing something be successful, then by the time you're going to be done with that, especially in an industry where it takes a year, 2 years to actually finish anything, you will be too late to copy anything that is successful now. So before we get started on that, I just wanted to go through the process of making a video game really quickly. I'm assuming most of you are either game developers or creatives, people that are interested in game development. So I just thought I'd start all the way at the start, right? So a game usually starts with an idea. And this notion of an idea, it sounds very complicated. It sounds very big. Usually when people think of ideas, they think of these big worlds with characters, with places, with, and for game ideas, that's actually usually not the right place to start, right? If I tell you, imagine that there is a dragon, right, in a castle, and the castle is in the clouds, and you're going to fight that dragon. If I ask you what color the dragon is, you can probably fill in a color real fast, right? Your brain is really good at just going like, okay, blue, red. And if I tell you, okay, what does the castle look like, right? The one in the sky on the clouds, you can fill out the type of stone, the shape of it. Maybe you have a medieval castle, Maybe you have more of an Asian style castle. Maybe you have, like one of those big concrete fortresses. I don't know. The thing is, our brain is really good at filling in details like that. A computer is absolutely not, right? A computer might be the smartest dumb thing you've ever met. These things can only do exactly what you tell them to and nothing else. So if you say a castle, it goes, what is a castle? And you go a building of bricks and it goes, what is a building and what are bricks, right? So when you're coming up with game ideas, usually the thing you want to start from is a feeling or a moment that you want to give the player, right? And that feeling of the dragon in the castle is a sense of grandeur, right? Like this big opposing threat, and you feel small, and this thing is big, and the location you're in is otherworldly or fantastic. Those are way better places to start from when you're coming up with a game idea. So the basic process is basically split into 4 parts. You ideate, which is you come up with ideas, right? And in this part of the process, anything goes, right? You can come up with anything you want. If you want to have the castle and the dragon, go for it, right? Now, your second step is to brainstorm. And brainstorming is effectively opening up your possibility space as wide as you can. So you're trying to come up with as many ideas as possible for how you can make certain things happen. Now, a brainstorm has to have a goal, right? So you can say, okay, how do we get the sense of grandeur, right? Like, how do we do that? And you might say, oh, well, okay, big enemies, right? Like that's one way of doing it. But the trick with brainstorming is to not stop when you think you've got the answer. You keep coming up with ideas, good ideas, bad ideas, silly ideas, ridiculous ideas. Doesn't matter. Any idea is good, right? You just write them down. And then you kind of think further, and then, you go like, okay, big enemies. So big enemies, do they need to fly? Maybe some flying enemies, maybe they have to be real slow, right? Like, are big enemies slow? Maybe big enemies have to be slow to feel like big and weighty, right? When they step, does the ground shake? Would that make you feel smaller, right? Like, so you're thinking of these ideas and then eventually go, okay, we've got big enemies. So let's think of another idea, right? Like, what else would create grandeur? Maybe a big environment. The enemies don't need to be big. Maybe just the place it's in needs to be big. And you keep going through these ideas of, okay, what would make this feeling happen? Now, your next step is going to be the prototype. And prototyping in game development is a weird word because a lot of people think, oh, now I have to program. Now I have to, I don't know how to program. I'm not very good at programming. A lot of people are not programmers. I was lucky enough to grow up a programmer since I was 6 years old. But my former co-founder at Vlaambeer, my game studio before this, he was not a programmer at all. He was a terrible programmer, honestly. Maybe one of the worst programmers I've ever met in my life. But he was incredible at prototyping because he knew what he was good at, right? He was really good at just a few things. He could draw really quickly, not very good, but really quickly. And he could do a few programming tricks, right? He knew how to make 2 things bounce, and he knew how to make things move. That was basically all he knew. But he was very good at prototyping with just those 2 things. So he would prototype. And he would create these little games in something called Game Maker, which is a really, it's basically made for kids. It's this program made for kids to learn how to program. But he was very good at just that. And so he would make a prototype. And there are lots of other prototypes. There are prototypes that, you can draw them on a piece of paper. Or you can have little figurines to play out your prototype. Like, you don't have to program to test everything, right? You just have to be able to test whether what you said is true. So if you want to figure out whether it feels big to be in a really big space, if you're a 3D modeler, that's really easy. You just make that 3D space, you put the camera in there. If you can only draw on paper, draw a big space of paper. You don't have to be able to draw good. This is a real professional thing that I'm using right now in a project I'm working on, right? It is not very good. But it does what it needs to, which is it communicates to people, the people that I'm working with, that this is what I want to make. And I can explain everything on that image and explain why that is important. And that's the point of prototyping. The point of prototyping is figuring out whether something actually works or whether it just works in your brain. Because like I said, the computer, not that smart, right? So, okay, now we prototype. And now the prototyping is the first time in the entire process that we're going to judge what we've made. We don't judge during ideation. We don't judge during prototyping, during brainstorming. We judge during prototyping. In prototyping, we check and we go, okay, this is what we needed it to do. Is it doing that, right? And again, it doesn't matter whether you're writing, whether you're programming, whether you're drawing, whether you're making sounds into the microphone, right? Like if I want like a good explosion and I talk to my sound designer and I go like, no, it needs to like, not like, then that's fine. If it works, it's fine. So prototyping, you test, and usually prototypes look really bad. A lot of game developers and me try so hard on their prototype. Your prototype is for throwing away. You just test whether it works. If it works, done. Make a note, this works, throw everything out, right? And then comes implementation. And implementation is the part where you try to get everything right. So implementation is the part where you go, okay, this worked, we're gonna keep that, we're gonna make that properly, we're gonna program it, we're gonna make art. And then you kind of keep making that loop, right? That loop is called an iteration. And iterative game development is the heart of all game development. The trick is to learn to get really good and really fast at failing, not at succeeding. Succeeding is the easy part. Like the failing part is the hard part, because what you're going to do is you're going to keep trying and trying. And every time you try, you get a little closer to what you need to be, right? Because game development is always a question. You never know where you're going to end up. Even if you try to copy somebody else's game, you're never quite sure if it's going to work, right? Because the industry changes all the time. What people know changes all the time. What people are bringing to their game changes all the time. Last year, if you're paying attention to games, Animal Crossing came out exactly at the start of the pandemic for so many people around the world, right? And it was the perfect game for that moment. There's no way to test for that. There's no way to, that's what the world was. And now lots of people are trying to make Animal Crossing games, and we don't know if any of them is going to work, right? We don't know if any of them is going to succeed, because even though it worked then, we don't know if it worked now. And it's only, what, 9 months later? Feels much longer, doesn't it? But that's the thing with game development. The trick is learn to get really good at testing whether something is bad. That's the whole job. There's nothing besides that. The whole job is try to learn to communicate with your team, with the people you're working with, what you're making. Now, the second part of game development that I always want to teach people that want to go into the industry, and I have limited time, so I want to make sure that I get as many of the lessons that I find important out to you, is when you're making games and you want to make them commercially, you're a business, right? And if you're a business, you have to treat your business as a business. And that sounds like a big deal. And I know I didn't grow up an entrepreneur. I didn't have any business practice. I didn't have any business training, didn't have business education. I had to learn everything through failing. And I think one of the strangest stories for me was I grew up relatively poor, right? Like my dad is an immigrant to the Netherlands, and he never really got a good job. He ended up a teacher, which was paid well enough. My mother, she was going to be, what do you call it? An Egyptologist focused on the old history of Egypt. But when she met my dad, she ended up, him being an immigrant, she ended up having to like find a job then. So she never finished her education. So she too never had a really well-paying job. My first computer was a hand-me-down from an uncle. And then I started this business, right? And I started this games company. And for the very first game we made, somebody offered $4,000, which was a massive amount of money. And we looked at it and we're like, we should ask for more. So we asked for more. We asked for $6,000. And then somebody else offered $8,000. And then in the end, we ended up with $10,001 because somebody offered 10,000 and we emailed the other person and we were just like, if you can offer even $1 more, we'll take it. And they just offered $1 more. So we ended up with 10,001. And then we got our second job, right? And our second job was for Cartoon Network. Huge company, right? So me and my co-founder, we sat down and we said, like, we should ask for way more than 10,000, right? And this blew our mind because we'd never made anything like that. $10,000 was more money than we had ever imagined owning. And they said, well, what do you want? And we said, like, well, so we negotiated between two of us and we said $30,000. And then Cartoon Network's like, okay. And I was like, well, darn. Because if they just said, okay, clearly we didn't ask for that much, right? So a friend of mine, and we did that project for $30,000. A friend of mine had a job with Cartoon Network later, and they came to us and they said, like, how much did they pay you? And I'm like, well, we said 30,000. They just said like, yep. So you should ask for way more. So he went back and he went to them and he said 60,000. You know what they said? They said, yep. So the guy that I negotiated with at Cartoon Network, I talked to him after he left his job a few years ago, and I asked him like, so how much did you fund game? Like, how much did you pay developers for games back then? And he said like, oh, $250,000, something like that. And I'm like, so if I had said like 200,000, you would have been like, yeah. He's like, yeah. Like usually at 250, my boss goes like, can you negotiate that down a little? So because I was thinking as the kid, right? I was thinking as Rami, who grew up with two poor parents and his hand-me-down computer. I never thought of it from their perspective. But if you're a business, you have to think of business the way they think of business. And the way they think of business is $250,000 for a video game. That's pretty cheap. That's pretty acceptable, right? So when I see a lot of independent developers pitch their game or try to sell their game to publishers nowadays, to Devolver Digital or Raw Fury or any of these creative companies, these publishers, often what I see is they undervalue their work, right? They say, oh, it's $30,000, it's $15,000. And I've helped a lot of indies get a publishing deal. And the biggest tip I give them is ask for more, right? Just ask for more. Because here's the thing, if I was a publisher and I'm looking for games to publish, right? And you come to me and say, for $15,000, I will work for a year and a half. Then I look at it and I'm like, I'm not sure if you can make it with that money, right? I'm not sure if you can pay for the art, you can pay for the music, you can pay for your own life and actually finish this project. You might need to get a second job to cover it. You might not be able to pay good collaborators. You might not finish this game. Well, if you come to me and say, I need $250,000, and that's too much for me as a publisher, I would just go like, can't do $250,000. How about 200, right? So if you ask for too little, that's always a no. If you ask for too much, they negotiate. That's how negotiations work, right? It's how contracts work. Publishers will send you a contract, and it will be so unfair. It will be so unfair towards them. But that's how contracts work. Their lawyers write their contract so that it's the best it can be for them, and then they expect you. You're actually expected to go, well, no, this I don't want to do that, and I think that's too much. And so your lawyer, if you have a lawyer, you should if you're working with contracts really, will then go and say like, okay, we can work this down, and then in the middle is the contract you end up with. Now this is true both if you're an independent developer, but also if you want to work in the games industry as an artist, as a specialized employee of a studio. The biggest thing I see is people undervalue themselves. They don't have the confidence to say that they're good at something, right? And here's the thing, nobody likes an arrogant person, but everybody likes people that know their own value, right? Arrogance is a no-go in this industry. Trying to think that you know very well or better than people that have way more experience in the industry, it's not going to work well for you. But confidence, your knowledge of your ability, your knowledge of what you're good at, that's very important. Because no matter who you are, there's something unique about your work, which is that it's your work, right? And that it's invisible to you. You will never see it. You will never truly understand what that means, but your work is unique. Your work is genuine, it's sincere. It comes from you as a person. It comes from your cultural background. It comes from your history. It comes from your life. And the more you hone in on that, the more you make the work you aspire to make rather than the work you think you're expected to make, the better your work will be. And this I've seen all around the world. I spent the last decade traveling around the world, every continent on Earth except for the Antarctic Circle. There's not that many game developers there, I think. I've been everywhere, and no matter where I go, the games that are successful, the works that are successful, the people that are successful, they're never trying to copy. They're never trying to steal. They're never trying to be someone they're not. They're always themselves. They always show what they can do. And yeah, of course, if you're applying to a game studio, of course you're going to show the work you do that fits their work, right? But you're not going to make work specifically for that. You're not going to go and go, okay, well, This is not really what I'm good at. It's not really what I like. I'm just going to do it anyway. Maybe I'll get a job. Because then now you're doing a job you don't like. You're never going to be able to sustain yourself in the industry like that. Because, God, the games industry, even though it sounds like a really cushy job, it's a hard industry. It's a difficult industry. There's so many people that want to be in games. There's so much competition out there. And the expectations are very high for anybody that gets a job in the industry. We are working in the industry to make things better, right? To make things fairer, to make a crunch go away where people have to overwork long hours. We're working on these issues, but they're in progress. And the industry, as it is now, can be really difficult. So I always tell people, making games, you require three things, right? You require time or money, you require knowledge, and you require motivation. Those are the three things you need. Now, if I were to take one of them away, right? Say I take away money or time, but you have the knowledge, you have the motivation, then it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years, but you'll make a video game, right? Now, if I take away the knowledge, but you still have money and time, you still have motivation, you can hire people, right? You can hire people to help fill the gap in knowledge that you have. So you're fine as well. But if I take away motivation, you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the time in the world, you can have all the knowledge in the world. You're not going to make a video game. So what I recommend people more than anything, if you want to go into games, is be genuine, be sincere, be yourself, make the works based on the things you care about. Don't try and make the next Fall Guys, the next Among Us, the next Call of Duty. The folks that are making those games are extremely good at that. You're not going to be better at them than that. They spend decades getting good at that specific trick. So instead of trying to focus on being like somebody else, learn to focus on what makes you special as a creator, as an artist, as a concept artist, as a musician, as a programmer, as a designer. What is the thing that you can bring to video games that nobody else can, because nobody else is you? And if you look at some of the most interesting work around the world, it's projects like Farsh by an Iranian game developers about rolling a carpet. It's games as Broforce from South Africa, a very South African sarcastic game about American world police. There's games from all over the world that are so genuine, so sincere in what they are. They tell stories that nobody else can. Those are the games that end up being successful, right? It's not the games that try to be like everybody else. Now, those are three quick lessons that I think are incredibly important in games. Let me see. Do I have time for one more, Svati?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
One more then. Everybody thinks that in games, the most important thing you can have is skills, right? Hard skills. You're a good programmer, you're a good artist, you're a good musician, good sound designer. That's not it. Because here's what happens. If I look to hire somebody, right, and I want to hire a good programmer, how many good programmers do you think are out there? There's thousands, tens of thousands, right? They're all there and they all want a job, right? So I'm not looking for a good programmer. I'm not even looking for the best programmer. No. What I'm looking for is the programmer that communicates well, that is pleasant to work with, that treats their coworkers, properly, that communicates. That's what I want. That's what I want in anybody I work with. I want a good communicator, somebody who will sit down, and when the designer sits down next to my programmer and the designer goes, "Can we do this?" The programmer doesn't go, "No, of course not. No, that's not, no, I want the programmer that sits down and goes like, I said, listen, no, look, so your idea probably not going to work. Let me show you why." That's the programmer I'm looking for. I'm looking for the programmer that makes my team feel welcome, that makes my team feel pleasant, that adds value to my team, not just in that they're a good programmer, but also that they're a good person, that they're a pleasant person to work with. And these are called soft skills, right? They're your soft skills. You can't define them with a grade. You can't define them with a degree. They're the skills that you can't really put into words, but they're incredibly important, right? If you are trying to get into the games industry, I would recommend practicing those. Practice talking to people about your ideas. Practice talking to people about the complications in the work you come across. If you don't have a community right now that you can talk to about these things, try applying to game jams. Game jams are these online events. There's many of them around the world. You have Ludum Dare. Soon you will have the Global Game Jam, worldwide event that you can participate in, where you can get in touch with local game developers or game developers in the area around you. And game jams are lovely. They're 48 hours to a week long, and you get a theme and you make a video game based on that theme. And it's all game developers or aspiring game developers, people you can talk to, people you can argue with, people you can discuss things with and be excited about game development with, right? So of all the skills you can learn, of all the things you can take away, I think the most important thing to remember from this talk, right? Brains are not computers, right? Computers are these incredible devices, but they're not really smart. And even though a lot of people think that a game idea is just like a moment or a location or a place, a game idea is about actions. It's about verbs. What does the player do? How does it make the player feel? That connection. So if you're working on a game idea, your game idea needs to be about verbs, about things the player does, not about things the player sees, not about places the player goes, not about enemies the player faces. What does the player do? What button do they press? How does that make them feel? Good game development isn't about success, it's about failing fast. Iteration is the core word of game development, which means that you go in this loop trying to come up with ideas of how to solve something, trying them, testing them, seeing which ones work, implementing them, and then failing over and over again until eventually you figure it out. That's because so much of our industry, so much of our work is unknown. And so much of a game is so complex that the solutions you find will probably only work for your game, won't work for other games. And stealing or copying something from another game probably won't work in yours without adjusting it. So failing fast is one of the most important things you can do. The third thing is, if you're going to be a business in our industry, be a business. Please be a business. Don't be like me, where you leave $170,000 sitting on a table because you bring your humble, pleasant, poor, unexperienced brain to these negotiations. These are massive corporations with lots of money. Take their money. Just take their money. Take as much of their money as you can. Take all of it. Like, the more you can take, the better it is, right? You don't have to feel bad for them. They'll be fine. If you have the opportunity to ever pitch a game, if you ever go and pitch, really calculate what is industry standard prices, not what can I survive on, not how can I pay my team without paying myself. No, none of that nonsense. Pay everybody the best wage you can pay them. Pay them more than the best wage you can pay them. Get that budget and then ask for that budget. And you'll find that most people will accept that way better than they'll accept your quickly, let's get as low as possible. If you've ever seen Kickstarter, you know the Kickstarter, you see the product, and you see the amount of money they're looking for, and you're just like, they cannot make that for that money. And then afterwards they get the amount and they go like, oh, we hoped we would have reached more stretch goals. Like, that's what you're doing when you ask for too little. Don't ask for too little. Ask for more than you need. Ask for way more than you need. Figure out what you need at 30%. Figure that out, and they'll negotiate it back down, right? They'll go back down. They'll go, okay, no, that's too much. Well, you'll end up somewhere above what you needed. And the final thing is to be genuine. Be yourself, be sincere, be kind, be welcoming, be warm, be patient. This is an industry of lots of stress, and what we need in the industry is not the best programmer. We need the nicest programmer. It's not the best artist. We need the most pleasant artist. It's not the best designer. We need the designer that can explain their idea and make all of us excited to work with them, right? That's what we need in this industry. So practice that. You can practice that. You can get better at that. It is lots of work, but if you love video games, if you're here watching this on your first 5 days of the year, and you're spending half an hour listening to a guy ramble about his industry and his games industry experience, then sure, you love video games. So if you love video games, I promise you it's worth the effort. That was it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rami. That's incredible. So we're going to have some questions for you now. These are off the record, so don't worry if you want to ask the most awkward things you want to. We're here for, and don't worry about being honest as well. We do not put this up online afterward.